Hey y'all, in this video we're going to further our adventures in 3D carving by introducing levels and level clipping to our composite 3D models. Let me preface this by saying that even though I'm demonstrating this in Aspire version 10.5, this works exactly the same way in VCarve Desktop and VCarve Pro. Now we're going to attempt to recreate this carving of a pair of horses' heads within a rather deep dish. To do that, we'll incorporate level clipping and multiple levels. So let's go over to a new session of Aspire where I have already got my job set up, ready to go. This is a single-sided job. My width in X is 12 inches. My height in Y is 12 inches. My thickness is 3/4 of an inch. My Z0 position is at the material surface. For layout purposes, my XY datum position is in the center. And because we're working with 3D models, my modeling resolution is set to very high. We'll click OK and come on over. Now, before I bring in anything, we need to take a brief refresher in the concept of composite modeling. Let me jump over into my modeling tab. Every 3D composite model I have demonstrated so far has been done in one single level, unless it's a file that I have imported. Normally, this is okay to do if you're simply adding or merging 2 or 3 models and not applying any effects to that level or to that model. Well, this time we're going to expand on that just a little bit. But the fundamental thing to remember is, whether you're using VCarve or Aspire, the software always models from the bottom up. Whether you have a single level and you have 3 or 4 components down here on that level, or you have multiple levels with multiple components within them, it always starts from the bottom up. So the first component you have down here will be your base, and everything you add to that is either added to, subtracted from, or merged with that base model or that base component. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and add our base component. In this case, it's going to be that dish. So we'll come over to the Clipart tab, and we'll go into the Clipart folder in the library, and I'll come over here to Domes and Dishes, and I'm going to select this flat round circle. So I'll double-click it to put one out in the middle of my material. Then I'll come back over to the Modeling tab. Now, I know the size I want this dish to be. I'd like it to be 10 inches in diameter and about a 1/2 inch deep. So I'll come over here to Set Selected Object Size, make sure I have Link XY checked, and I'll set my width in X to 10 inches, which automatically changes my height in Y to 10 inches, and I'll click Apply. Then I can close that window. First thing I want to do is come up here to the Properties, and we see that with a 10-inch diameter, the shape height is 0.4514 inches. I'd like to make sure that that is a 1/2 inch, so I'll change that to 0.5. Also, our combine mode right now is set to merge. That would mean it's a dome shape. I don't want a dome shape, I want a dish shape. So let's go ahead and change our combine mode to subtract up here And there we have our 1/2-inch dish. This row of icons up here is the combine mode, the same as if I right-click and use the context menu here. Let me click off, go back onto my flat round circle. So I have changed my combine mode to subtractive here, and I've changed my shape height to a 1/2-inch deep here. I can go ahead and close that. Now let me go back to a straight Z view, and I'm going to go ahead and tile my 2D view and 3D view vertically so we can keep an eye on what's going on out here. So I have my dish. Now I want to add the horse's head. So I'll come back over to the Clipart tab, and I'll go up here to Animals, and I'm going to scroll down to the horse that I want to use, which is this one right here. And I'll double-click on that to put one out in the center of my material. And you can see our 3D view updates at the same time. Again, I'll come back over to the Modeling tab, because that's where we're going to do most of our work. And I want to drag this horse down over here to the bottom left, and we can see those crosshairs appear when I do that. I just want to drag it down so that it's to the left of my X0 crosshair. But I want to leave just enough of it outside of that dish, because I don't want that bottom edge to be a part of my model. Now here we see the issue that we have. Let me click off here and come over and take a look in my 3D view, and let's maximize that for a minute. The problem we have here is this portion of that horse is still being added outside of this dish. Now, in Aspire, there are easy ways of deleting this, of editing it so that this portion of the horse is no longer a part of this component. But that's a destructive way of doing it. You basically have edited the model, and that portion of the model is no longer a part of it. So if I reposition this horse's head, that edit is going to follow along. By using a method called level clipping, it's a non-destructive way of editing this model and cropping out this portion down here. So I could reposition the horse if I wanted to, and that level would automatically update and crop away anything outside of my dish. So in order to do that, we'll have to apply level clipping. Well, before we can do that, though, I want to check a few things about this horse. We need to get into the properties and take a look at it. So, back in the 2D view with my horse selected, I'll come up here into the properties. The shape height here is 0.4724. That's okay. I prefer to work with round numbers, so let's make it 0.45. It's not really going to change much, but we want to make sure that the height of this model is less than the depth of our dish. If you remember, our dish was 1/2 inch deep. So this is just about right. The combine mode is set to add right now. I'm going to go ahead and leave that just for the purposes of this demonstration. We'll go ahead and we'll close our horse. And then we'll tap the letter F on the keyboard to center up our 2D view. I'm going to go ahead and tile the 2D with the 3D. We still have this issue down here. What I'll want to do is I'll want to create a closed vector around this dish to clip our horse component to. Here in the 2D view, I'll select my dish, and I'll come up here to create a vector boundary around the selected component, and I'll just click it. Now, no changes happened out here in the 3D view, but if we zoom in here, we can see we now have a vector around our dish. And we're going to use that to clip this entire level. Now, when I do this, anything that's outside of this vector is going to be cropped out of our component. With the vector selected, I'll come over here to the level title, not any of the components in that level. I'll come to the level title, right-click, and come down here and we see clipping. When I hover over clipping, this submenu pops up, and I have apply, update, or remove. Right now I want to apply clipping to this level, so I'll click apply, and we see over here in the 3D view, everything outside of that vector has been cropped. There is no change in the 2D view. The change happened in the 3D view. Now, we still have some problems here because this portion of the horse that has been cropped away is being added to the top of our dish. So what we'll need to do here is a couple of things. We'll need to change the combine mode of our horse from add to merge. So we'll right click, combine mode, change that to merge. Now that did two things. It eliminated that portion that was standing up, but now we're merging with the top of the model, not with the bottom. So I'll need to go back into the properties of the horse. If we take a look at the model here, at this component, we can see that we have a huge base. That is where the issue is. So I'll want to modify the base height of this component. Let me go back to a straight Z view. And let's maximize our 3D view to do this. And I'll go ahead and make sure my horse's head is selected, come up to the properties, and I want to reduce the base height. I want to leave my shape height at 0.45, but I want to reduce the base height. So let's bring this down, a little bit more than halfway. And we see now that the horse head is starting to sink down into that dish the way we want it. Let's go ahead and let's just bring it down to the max and see what that does. That's a little bit better. We still have some areas that are protruding up above the level of the top of our dish. So we'll need to go ahead and reduce the shape height as well. Let's bring that down to 0.40 and see if that's enough. We'll let it update, and that is enough. We still have quite a thick base here, but that's all right. We do want it to stand proud of the bottom of this dish. But in looking around here, we can see that it no longer sticks up above the surface of our dish, and it blends in rather well. By changing my combine mode to merge, as well as reducing the base height and a little bit of the shape height, we've brought that model down to where it's not sticking up above the surface of the material, and the area down here where the clipping takes place is at the same height or below the surface of our dish. We're just about finished with this model here. We can go ahead and close our properties window. We'll take a straight Z view, open up my 2D view again, and I'm going to make sure that horse's head is selected because I want to copy. I want another horse's head over here that's identical to this one. So with our horse selected, I'll come up here to Mirror Selected Objects, and I'll click that icon. I want to flip about the job center, and I want to create a mirrored copy. And I'll just click on Flip Horizontal. We now have two horses' heads. And if we look at it here, there is an area outside this crop line. If we tile our 3D view, we can see that we have the same situation here. It's blending in nicely with the edge of this dish. Let me maximize my 3D view. It's blending in nicely with the edge of this dish, and we don't have any problems at all there. It's taken the same base height and shape height from this component. If we close this, we can see the component has been added to this level. Okay, now we have a potential problem that we're going to need to solve before we get into it. If you remember my video on the introduction to the zero plane, and I'll put a link to that video in a card up here right about now, we know that if we attempt to carve this dish, we're going to have these jagged edges that the software is going to attempt to carve when we go to calculate this toolpath and preview it. So the way we have taken care of this in the past has been to apply a zero plane, which would fill in these jagged edges and give us a nice smooth surface for our dish to be carved into. The problem with that is we have level clipping applied to this level. Let me go back to a straight Z view, tile our 2D view and 3D view. If I apply a zero plane to this level, that zero plane is going to be clipped by this vector as well. And we don't want to do that. That would allow the bit to carve out these jagged lines because the software thinks it's part of the model. So let me click off out here. And I'll go over here into my component tree, and I'm going to put my cursor over level 1. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to insert a new level. And that level 2, is above level 1. Remember, the software models from the bottom up. Level 2 is where I'm going to add my zero plane. The zero plane is not affected by level clipping down here because it's on its own level. And as you can see, by maximizing the 3D view, it has filled in those jagged edges, so I no longer have to worry about that bit trying to carve these jagged edges. I should get a nice smooth surface. There's only one way to find out, though, and that is to head over to the Toolpath tab and calculate some toolpaths. So with this vector selected, I'm going to come over and do a 3D roughing toolpath. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, and I'm going to machine to the selected vector. I'm not going to use any boundary offset at all. I'm going to use a machining allowance of 20/1000ths of an inch. That will leave a skin of material a minimum of 20/1000ths of an inch thick for the finishing toolpath to come back and clean up. I'm going to use a Z-level roughing strategy, and I'm just going to go ahead and call this 3D roughing. We'll calculate, and we'll preview. Okay, with our 3D roughing toolpath complete, we can see this is a rather deep dish, and we're getting some nice relief on the horses. Go back to a straight Z view, close our preview, go back to the 2D view, make sure our vector is still selected. and we'll do a 3D finishing toolpath. I'm going to use a 1/16 of an inch tapered ball nose, and I'm going to machine to the selected vector. Again, this one here. Again, no boundary offset, and I'm going to use a raster machine strategy with a raster angle of 40 degrees. Now let me explain why I do this. I use a raster strategy because that forces the software to begin carving out in this area here. If I use an offset strategy, the bit is going to come over to the center of my material and plunge down that 1/2 of an inch to the bottom of the dish and then start carving in a circle. Even though a tapered ball nose bit is pretty robust, at the end of the day, that is still a 1/16 of an inch diameter bit. If I select an offset strategy and I just plunge down into the center of this material and start carving, I run the risk of breaking the tip of that bit. So by using a raster strategy, it's going to start out here in the shallower portions and work its way down into the model, saving the tip of my tapered ball nose bit. So that's why I use a raster strategy rather than an offset strategy, especially on something that's this deep. Yes, I have done a 3D roughing toolpath, and it has removed the majority of that material, but I would rather ease into the material and carve it away than try to plunge into the center of it and let it work its way out. It's just easier on the bit and easier on the machine. I use a raster angle of 40 degrees to cut basically across the grain of the material. Now, this model, the grain of the wood could either run horizontally or it could run vertically. That's entirely up to you. But by running at an angle, I'm shearing off those wood fibers. I'm not running with the grain. I'm not running perpendicular to the grain. I'm running at an angle so it will cut those fibers rather than try to rip them or peel them. So that's why I use a raster angle of about 40 degrees. I could use 45, I could use 35. 40 is a nice round number and gives me a good finish. So we'll go ahead and we'll name this 3D finish. We'll calculate the tool path. Now if we zoom in, we can see, if we look real close, and we have to zoom in quite a bit, we see this red line from the center here, coming over this way. This is a rapid move. If we look in here real close, we can see this light blue line here. That is our plunge move. The software, when it calculated this tool path, it forced the bit to wrap it over here and make our plunge to do our 3D carve here. It will make a quick cut, lift up, come over here, drop back down, and continue, and then start moving back and forth, rastering this way, slowly easing its way into the material, rather than just plunging in and attempting to cut from the center. Let's go back to a straight Z view, and we'll go ahead and preview this toolpath. Okay, with our 3D finishing toolpath complete, we can take a look here and see that that zero plane has taken care of those rough edges just fine. We don't have any weird looking gouges out here. And any cleanup that needs to be done is basically down to my bit selection. The 16th inch bit may be a bit big for this, but overall, I'm very happy with this design. Our models merged with the wall of this dish just fine. And everything is changeable still and editable still. I didn't make any permanent changes to these horses' heads. I could change position or even change the model. By using level clipping, let's go ahead and close our preview. Go back over to the drawing side here. By using level clipping down here to crop these two horses' heads, I've been able to customize this component, which ordinarily would have all this area out here attached to it. Now, again, if I wanted to change the position of one of these models, let me tile my 2D and 3D view. I could bring that to a straight Z view so you can see it. I could select this and move it back over here a bit. Level clipping automatically clips that model to reflect that change. I don't have to do anything further out here with shape heights or combine modes or anything else. And I could do the same out here, bring this one further out if I wanted to add some more artwork up in here. Now, I would have to go recalculate my toolpath, but that's to be expected. This could also be used as a template. We could save this as a template file. Then, if I got a commission to do something involving a couple of different models, it would be a simple matter of removing these horses' heads, coming back into the clip art, and finding new components to put into this level. Let me Control Z to undo those two moves. And there you see in real time how well that level clipping works. The position of both of these components changed, but the area down here where it merges with the dish has not changed. Also, just to reiterate, by putting that zero plane on its own level above the clipped level, the zero plane itself is not clipped. And that allows me to get these smooth edges here in my 3D view. So, this is a basic overview of level clipping. And I know it's a long video and a rather simple concept, but there were enough points that needed to be emphasized. I felt the need to take my time. In future videos, we're going to be getting a little bit more fancy, and we'll add a few more steps to level clipping to kind of advance our skills and introduce a little bit more of a wow factor to our 3D carving. But that's for future videos. For right now, if you got anything out of this video at all, I do hope you'll give me a thumbs up. And as usual, this afternoon at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be hosting a live Q&A session right here on my YouTube channel where we can discuss anything I have demonstrated in this video or any other questions about the Vectric software. That's today at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel. And I put a link in the description box below to that live Q&A session. I've also put a link to the playlist of all of my 3D carvings for beginners videos down there in the description box of this video. So, I hope to see you this afternoon for the live Q&A. And as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not. I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and y'all take care.